high-quality, comparable data on people with disabilities in Barbados and the wider Caribbean is unfortunately lacking. This is a major source of frustration and concern for those working to protect and promote human rights and facilitate the opportunity of meaningful participation and inclusion of people with disabilities in all aspects of civic life. Statistics on disability are essential tools in the planning, implementation, and monitoring of policies and programs for promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. Disability data is also crucial for determining the prevalence of disability in a population and identifying the needs and characteristics of subgroups within the disabled population. The continuing need for reliable and comparable data on persons with disabilities is also emphasized as one of the key aspects of monitoring the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Article 31 requires that governments collect the appropriate statistics that would facilitate the monitoring of the CRPD. In addition, the collection of the relevant disability data should complement and facilitate the development and implementation of the appropriate national policies and programs for the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities.
2, 1.
The good news is that the government of Barbados has recognized the need for data on disability. Unlike some of its neighboring islands, Barbados does have a dedicated national disability unit within the Ministry of Social Transformation. It also set up an advisory committee on persons with disabilities mandated to prepare a national policy on disabilities, which offers comprehensive protection for persons with disabilities. This bill is currently being approved by Cabinet. In the meantime, the only official source of disability data available is provided by the Population and Housing Census. In Barbados, this is Census 2010. The 2020 household census was shifted to 2021, largely due to restrictions imposed by COVID-19. The data from this census is still being collated, and it is hoped it will be released before the end of the year. This census should provide more in-depth insights into the landscape of disability in Barbados. What we do know is that in the Caribbean, there are over 1 million persons living with some form of disability. But persons with disabilities face discrimination and exclusion caused by underlying systemic barriers that limit the meaningful participation of persons with disabilities in social, economic, and political life. Persons with disabilities have lower outcomes in education, employment, and health compared to other population groups. In 2000s, the household census data suggested that Barbados had a working age population of approximately 6,674 persons with disabilities. Maynard and Blackman state that many of whom are believed to live below the poverty line. According to the census conducted in 2010, it is estimated that there were about 14,000 persons in Barbados who considered themselves to have at least one disability, representing 5% of the total population at that time. Edmund Hinkson, chair of the Advisory Committee on Persons with Disabilities, indicated that the 2010 census showed that a shocking 90% of people with disabilities of working age were unemployed, approximately 10 times higher than the national average. Hinkson noted that with people now living longer, the number of persons with disabilities is likely to be higher in the current population. In terms of the deaf community in Barbados, there are various estimates. Harrington's 0.1% calculation points to a deaf population of 288, while Soper estimates approximately 400 deaf people who use sign language. According to King, who has served on a series of mission trips to Barbados over the last few years, there are approximately 300 signing deaf people in Barbados, which corresponds with the former president of the Barbados. Horizon Deaf charity Lionel Smith, who estimates that currently there are approximately 300 members of the deaf community, and if you include those who identify as hard of hearing, the numbers are likely to be closer to 3,000. A 2000s national survey of speech and hearing difficulties of primary children revealed that of the 902 children tested, a total of 5.27% of pupils tested exhibited some degree of hearing loss. A a figure comparable to that found for screening tests of hearing difficulties in the USA and UK. It is important, however, to realize that in the study, additional tests were added to follow up pupils who failed the initial screening test. Consequently, the 5.27% represents children who were confirmed to have significant levels of hearing loss likely to interfere with their progress at school, a finding that suggests that a greater proportion of children in Barbados experience significant levels of hearing loss than is the case in either the USA or UK. For the majority, or 4.27% of these children, this was because of impacted wax in one or both ear canals. A problem easily treated once identified, so it is worrying that this difficulty had not been recognized until the testing was carried out. It was also found that 0.52% of the pupils had a sensory neural hearing loss and that 0.42% had conductive losses. Although sensory neural losses tend to be severe and conductive losses either mild or moderate, the latter can sometimes be severe. The closest comparison with these figures is therefore the approximately 0.2% found in children with severe losses in the USA and UK. Although a rough estimate, it does suggest that a greater proportion of children in Barbados may experience severe hearing loss than in the USA or UK. In sum, at present, as we await the publication of the 2021 Housing and Population Census, we can roughly guesstimate from the above that Barbados has a deaf community of approximately 300 to 400, and that this figure is likely to extend to approximately 3,000 if we consider those that identify as hard of hearing. We can also surmise that approximately 0.5% of primary-age children have some form of severe sensory neural hearing loss sufficient to affect educational progress. The Irving Wilson School is currently the main educational institution specifically for deaf students in Barbados, although a small number of primary schools around the country also offer special education services in special classroom units where some deaf students attend. In addition, the Ann Hill School in St. Michael Parish offers secondary educational options for people with special educational needs. Research findings, methodology. The research framework for this project adopted both quantitative and qualitative approaches. A literature review is conducted to identify existing research and data on deafness in Barbados and the wider Caribbean. Quantitative data were collected through questionnaires and feedback forms from workshop and concert attendees, while qualitative data were gathered through classroom observations and interviews with members of the deaf community and other key stakeholders. Specifically, in-depth interviews were conducted with members of the deaf community, parents, government officials, medical professionals, deaf advocates, and teachers. 2 focus groups were also organized, one with the deaf community, the Calypso team, the Barbados Council for the Disabled, and the Deaf Heart Project, and another with a deaf women's group. Feedback was collected from 2 large-scale workshops, one focused on deaf awareness for hearing individuals, predominantly local business attendees, and the other on deaf pride and empowerment, aimed at members of the deaf community. Additionally, data were gathered from concert attendees through questionnaires assessing the concert's impact, and through in-depth interviews with an opportunistic sample of deaf and hearing audience members as they exited the venue. Interviews. 13 members of the deaf community participated in in-depth interviews for this research project. Supported by an American Sign Language interpreter, most interviews were conducted face-to-face, with some taking place online via Zoom. The aim was to gain a first-hand understanding of the deaf community in Barbados and, in their own words, provide an in-depth and vivid insight into their lives and experiences. The interviewees, aged between 25 and 60 years, included 8 females and 5 males. Additionally, 2 hearing parents shared their experiences. All interviews were audio recorded with the interviewee's consent, then transcribed and thematically coded. Strong and consistent themes emerged, and the shared experiences were categorized into the following areas: family support, education, work experience, deaf culture and identity, societal attitudes toward deafness and disability, barriers and challenges, aspirations, independence, and exposure to music. The next section brings these experiences to life, amplifying the voices of this often overlooked and marginalized community loud and clear.